You know, for the longest time, it felt like a law of physics. Every computer you bought was just massively faster than the last one. But that feeling's kind of gone away, hasn't it? So what happened to that relentless, non-stop march of computing speed? Let's dig in.
Seriously, think back to that feeling. You'd get a new PC or a new Mac, you'd fire it up, and programs that used to take forever would just fly. It was this predictable, almost magical cycle. But somewhere along the line, that magic seems to have sputtered out. So today, we're going to unpack exactly why that happened, and, more importantly, what it means for the future of all technology.
For a good long while, we were all living in this golden age of computing. The performance gains were so consistent, so reliable, that software developers, well, they got a free lunch. They could just write code and count on the fact that next year's hardware would make it run faster, all by itself.
I mean, just look at how steep this curve is. From the mid-'80s all the way to the early 2000s, processors were getting faster by an average of 52% every single year. Let that sink in for a second. Your computer was basically doubling in power every 18 months. It was this incredible, wild ride, and it was all being powered by what seemed like a magic trick of engineering.
And that magic trick was something called Dennard scaling. This was the golden rule for making chips. As you made the tiny little switches, the transistors, smaller, they also got faster and more power efficient. This let engineers just cram more and more of them onto a chip, crank up the speed, and the chip wouldn't melt. It was the engine that was driving that incredible performance curve we just saw.
But then, right around the mid-2000s, that predictable power-up, it didn't just slow down. It slammed into a wall. A very real and a very, very hot physical wall.
So here's the problem. As those transistors got unbelievably tiny, the laws of physics kind of started to rebel. They began to leak a little bit of electricity, almost like a tiny leaky faucet, even when they were supposed to be completely off. This leakage generated a ton of wasted heat, and, well, just like that, the magic was over. The ambition back then was just off the charts. Intel had this processor in the works, codenamed Tejas, and they were dreaming huge. They were actually targeting clock speeds that sound kinda nuts even today. The whole strategy was just raw speed, pushing the architecture to its absolute breaking point.
And this is why we never saw Tejas. It was a complete dead end. The chips are putting out so much heat they couldn't possibly be cooled, which led to this vicious cycle they call thermal runaway. See, the hotter the chip got, the more electricity it leaked, which, you guessed it, made it even hotter. The bottom line was crystal clear. The old strategy of just chasing higher clock speeds was over. It just wasn't going to work anymore.
So let's go back to our performance graph. Right here, you can see the exact moment the party ended. That insane 52% annual growth plummets to 23%, then drops again to 12%, and in the last few years, it slowed to a crawl, just 3.5% a year. Think about it. Doubling the performance of a processor went from taking about 2 years to taking almost 20 years. The free ride was officially over.
Now, this moment could have spelled the end of the line for performance growth, but it didn't. Instead, it forced everybody to radically change how they thought about computers. The battlefield for speed just moved somewhere else entirely.
Right. So with hardware speedups no longer guaranteed, the only path forward was to get smarter. Instead of just hoping for faster clocks, the entire industry had to shift its focus to software, to new algorithms, and to the actual design, the architecture of the chips themselves. That free lunch of automatic hardware gains was gone. Now you had to earn your performance.
Okay, so to really get a sense of how much performance was just being left on the table, a fascinating paper from 2020 looked at a super simple, fundamental task, matrix multiplication. It's something computers do all the time. They wanted to see how much faster they could make it, not by getting a better computer, but just by changing the software. And the results? They are absolutely mind-blowing.
All right, let's walk through this because it's just staggering. On the exact same machine, running the calculation with a standard Python script took over 7 hours. Oof. Switching to Java, that cut it down to 39 minutes. Pretty good. A more efficient program written in C got it down to 70 seconds. But then they used highly optimized algorithms and special instructions that are already built into the processor, and they finished the entire job in less than half a second.
From over 7 hours to 0.4 seconds. That is a speed up of 60,000 times on the same exact computer, What this proves is that there's this enormous ocean of untapped performance just sitting there inside our machines, if we're just clever enough with our software to go and find it.
So this is the new world we live in. The race for performance isn't just about making transistors smaller anymore. It's now being fought on 3 fronts all at once: writing smarter, more efficient code, discovering fundamentally better ways to solve problems with new algorithms, and designing very specialized and clever hardware.
And look, while this new era is way more complicated, a lot of the pioneers in this field, they think it's actually more exciting. They argue that we haven't lost anything. We've actually entered a new golden age for computing.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. John Hennessy and David Patterson, we're talking about 2 of the biggest legends in the history of computer architecture, who won the Turing Award, which is basically the Nobel Prize of computing. They're the ones who call this a new golden age. They say the end of easy wins has thrown the doors wide open for incredible creative innovation.
This slide really sums up the big shift in thinking. The old way was simple: brute force. Just crank up the clock speed on a chip that does everything okay. The new way is all about smart, holistic design. It means using specialized hardware, like GPUs for graphics, or these new TPUs for AI, and, crucially, designing the hardware and the software together so they work in perfect harmony.
Yeah, this graph really shows how complex modern computers have become. They're not just one thing, they're a whole system of different parts. And all these parts are improving at wildly different rates. So for example, moving huge amounts of data has gotten way faster, but the time it takes to get just that first little piece of data, that hasn't really kept up. The new challenge isn't just making one piece faster, it's being a master architect, a conductor, making sure all these mismatched parts work together smoothly without tripping over each other.
So, what's the bottom line here? First, performance gains aren't free anymore. They have to be earned. You have to hunt for them. Second, the future is specialized. We're going to see more and more chips that are designed to do one thing really, really well, like AI or video. And finally, the biggest breakthroughs are only going to happen when you have this coordinated dance between the coders, the algorithm designers, and the hardware engineers all working together.
You see, the end of the free lunch wasn't the end of progress at all. It was actually the beginning of a more interesting, a more challenging, and ultimately a much more innovative era. The first golden age really belonged to the physicists who figured out how to shrink silicon. So the big question for us now is, who are the heroes of this new golden age going to be? The clever hardware architects, the brilliant software coders, or the innovative mathematicians? Honestly, the answer is probably all of them, together.